Well, yesterday, 19 scholars issued a open letter to the bishops of the Catholic Church, formally accusing Pope Francis of the delict of heresy. It's kind of a big deal. So I'm here today with Tim. We're going to go through this document. We're going to look at 7 counts of the accused heresy against Pope Francis. And the different parts of this document is 20 pages long. So we're going to give you basically a survey of everything in here and make some conclusions and some observations. So, Tim, you've read it a couple times. I've read it a couple times. I think, it's worth noting this is a follow-up document to the 2017 open letter that was made to the Pope. Because a lot of people are seeing this and saying, well, why are they writing to the bishops? Why aren't they writing to the Pope? They already did that. 2017 Feast of Our Lady Mount Carmel, July 16th. They wrote a filial correction, and so this is the follow-up. That's important to know.
Yeah, it is. The takeaway in the first place is respond to your accusers. Whether you think they're crazy, whether you think they might be onto something, respond to them with good reason. Because when Burke and the deceased Cardinal Carlo Cafara, and then the 2 German cardinals made the 5 dubia to the Pope, that they were not only very reasonable, according to my estimation and yours, but even if the Pope deemed them unreasonable, that's a better reason to respond to them. Cardinal Burke, remember, many have forgotten until this week, had promised there will be a follow-up if the Pope doesn't respond. And this might or might not be it, even though he's not one of the signatories on this.
Yeah, my take on that is I think Cardinal Burke has something else in mind, because he did, in a sense, say, if you don't answer, something's going to happen, and everybody's been waiting for what that's going to be. But I don't see his name on this. There's no bishops. I think this is an independent movement. That's my take on it. I don't know if they were talking to Cardinal Burke or Brandmuller at all, but I don't know. What do you think, Tim? This seems like it's own venture.
Sure, he's not one of the signatories, but no. the general point still stands that it's not because of the dialectical nature of the logos, right? It's not a surprise that U.S. political discourse has 2 parties, right? 2 sides.
Sure,
it's natural. That's what dialectics is all about. It's not some odd thing. When I laugh when people bemoan this. When the church breaks down into 2 basic temperaments and 2 basic intellectual typos who are banding about these things, you're generally for the Francis program, Team Bergoglio, or you're generally not. And take it away from the realm of temperament. Those who cheered when we read the Dubia and wanted a response and wanted justice to be done after the publication in 2016 of Amoris Laetitia, we're cheering these 19 original signatories on this thing. So it doesn't really, I'm not saying there's formal causal connection. It's just we're all of a piece as it happens.
Right. I'm not so sure if I want to cheer it yet. The research in this is great. As I was reading it, Tim, I was like, man, this is like reading a mini series of TNT videos. Like all the names he goes through, Zanchetta. I mean, all the people we've covered in the videos, almost all the points they cover, we've covered in points. So none of this at all was shocking to me. I was just like, check. Yep, they did it. Check. Good job, guys. Sure. You hit that. Check. Oh, good citation. Didn't see that before. Check. Right down the list. So the punch list is on point here. The opening line reads like this for those who haven't read it. We are addressing this letter to you for 2 reasons. First, to accuse Pope Francis of the canonical delict of heresy, and second, to request that you take the steps necessary to deal with the grave situation of a heretical pope. Now, wow. I mean, that opening line is the most powerful line in all the 20 pages. I've gone back over them. I can't believe they wrote both of those. I mean, here on TNT, we say some wild stuff. We take the red pills and the black pills, and some people put on their tinfoil hats. But this right here is big boy. Gloves are off right here. H word is being used.
Right.
Canons
in
are being
sense.
invoked. Yes.
Right. Not material heresy, that what they're talking about here, so everyone knows, is formal heresy. This is as young Kiefer Sutherland says in Stand By Me, this is big time, baby. So this is it. Yeah, and no, you're right. I thought I might people truly don't realize, before we get on and do these TNT shows, you and I don't pre-brief that much, right?
No.
There's not a ton, because there's just not the time. We're doing 3 of these a week. So usually it's like what comes together, and it seems to be operatic of a sort. There's a concert. But here, I didn't know whether I was going to be, like any issue, I didn't know whether I was going to be slightly more circumspect, or you were. I mean, again, I'm there too. I'm where you just said. We just started rolling the tape as soon as I walked in. Yeah, I'm not. It's not a formal cheer, but it's a material cheer, right? Yeah, I mean, because like you said,
I agree. We agree on all the data points.
That's what I mean. The material, it's like good citation. I mean, they're talking about all the stuff we're talking about all the time.
Right.
Formally, canonically, it's like, whoa, let me think about this for a couple weeks.
Exactly. Yeah, because I mean, let's just think about this for a moment. You and I, Tim, as Catholics, we cannot be in communion with a Lutheran bishop. It's impossible. We're Catholics.
Wouldn't want to. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
We can't be in communion with an Arian bishop. In fact, in the early church, to be in communion with an Arian bishop made you a heretic. You are participating in their heresy. Right? So if you are saying that the Pope, if they say the grave situation of a heretical pope, an H-word pope, and they're accusing him of the canonical delict of heresy. Now, they haven't judged him. Obviously, no one can do that. That's the problem. We bring that up over and over on TNT. But if you're saying he is a heretic, which they say in this opening line, a heretical pope, my ecclesiastical sense says you also have to say, and therefore I am not in communion with him.
No, I agree.
And that is something that I, Taylor Marshall, on this date, cannot say. It's practically set of a contest. That's my concern.
I agreed, circumspectly. I mean, again, neither of us are canon lawyers. We're a couple of Catholic philosophers. So it's like, yeah, that's my caution too, where it's like, I don't want to be Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers here. It doesn't even sound.
Did you see his spot today?
Last night? You mean the one?
It was last night.
I originally just saw, I was working on some other thing I had a deadline on, and my buddy was playing it last night.
Yeah. I mean, where he says this is ridiculous, these aren't real scholars, that whole tirade.
Yeah. So everyone just take it back to what, if you will, to what I'm saying about just materially, at the level of, forget formal agreement or formal disagreement, but materially, one's either inclined to agree or disagree because of the dialectical nature of, the logos. Yeah, Jimmy Akin sounding now, he was always kind of a question mark to this point. He was sounding like, hey, I don't want to formally agree with these Francis critics. Maybe we all thought it was open that, materially he agreed with him or was privately rooting the way many cautious conservatives in the church, I think, have been. He's now sounding like he's actually chosen a side.
Yeah.
Is my impression.
I watched that too, and I thought, wow, Jimmy Akin is Team Francis. Officially, ridiculing these thinkers, the signees, of which there are 19, saying that this whole thing is embarrassing, it's ridiculous. I mean, he really went after it.
He did.
So, and then he was kind of like, the show's coming to an end, I don't want to talk about it. So I thought that was interesting. Have you seen Father Fessio's response? It just came out Yeah. I thought that was interesting too, because, Ignatius Press is Nouvelle Théologie and all that, but he was saying this merits a response. And if you go back to Martin Luther 1517, the church lost so much ground because they never responded to him. Council of Trent, it's like a couple decades later. And by then you've lost so many, counties and duchies and nations to the Protestant heresy. So the church needs to respond to this. You can't just say those are just 19 crazy guys.
No, even though Martin Luther, the more and more I learn, I think that's one crazy guy. These 19 signatories are not they're not easy to write off, especially the top names on the list are not goofballs. They're serious-minded individuals. The philosopher on the list, Kwasniewski, I think I really respect.
I like Kwasniewski a lot.
The ones that we are familiar to us, we I think I speak for both of us, we genuinely and generally respect. Martin Luther warranted, as you point out, a more robust response. Remember, the Pope originally sort of said, "Oh, this is just beef between the Dominicans and the Augustinians. It's Tetzel versus Luther." That's a mistake in any form, even if the critic is I think what today by psychotherapeutic standards would pass as a bona fide schizo, which I think Luther was. Yep. You still respond to them as long as they're not, wearing a propeller cap and doing this with their lips. You have to actually, if they make an articulate response, critique, you have to make some kind of response.
Yeah. Yeah, this isn't, remember that scene in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels where Steve Martin is the mentally challenged brother?
Yeah.
You remember that? He has
I've only seen it once. Yeah.
Okay, has the cork on the fork so he can't poke his eye out. Yeah. We're not dealing with that, right? We're dealing with some respectable people. Now, Father Aiden, and what's interesting is you have people on the spectrum here. So, Father Aiden Nichols is definitely a Nouvelle Theologie guy. He's respectable. He's an English Dominican. I was introduced to him back when I was an Anglican. He wrote a history on Anglicanism called The Panther and the Hind. All Anglicans have read it. But he's also written a number of books on Balthazar, and he's written a book on Ratzinger. So this is where he plays, so he's not like SSPX, Rad Trad, he's not on the Sede Vacantis forum boards,
Right.
This is a guy who's an English Dominican scholar who's well acquainted with and wading into Nouveau Theology topics.
Right.
And
Which is what Fessio said. I mean,
right.
Fessio, a Nouvelle Theologie guy, conservative, but, center right in the Catholic theological sphere. Everyone's naming Aiden Nichols as the first name and saying, hey, he's kind of in. This is why it's good to have a spectrum of that. We don't only need to talk to people on the far right in Catholicism. That's why it's good, because the fact that you have the signature of Father Aiden Nichols, you're sweeping up at least if not the assent or the consent of all of these people, at least the attention and the serious minds of people that are along the center right. Yeah, like Fessio.
Yeah, like Ignatius Press types, the people who look at their bookshelf and they have, like I even do, there's 60, 70 books there with that Ignatius Press stripe on it.
Sure.
This is now reaching that level. So it's not just, fringy people who go to independent Latin Mass chapels. It's not just SSPX, not just FSSP Institute. We're now sweeping in to that middle EWTN, Ignatius Press, Mother Angelica, that First Things, that core crowd.
So which is important. Which is
it's incredible.
A lot of good people there.
It's incredible that it's actually in 2019 that we're already there. I thought maybe it would take a little bit longer.
I know. It's sort of beautiful in a way. So that's I'm glad you said all that, really, because that's in a certain sense the main silver lining in this cloud is like, it's an important conversation to be had. If these were a bunch of canon lawyers saying canonically, let's depose the Pope, it would be like, whoa, we'd have to back off more. They're not talking canonically as much as just philosophically and theologically. They're saying things honestly. I'm not trying to boast. A lot of 5 of these 7 points are things I believe I said on whatever that was, so that day on April 2016, as I went through it, like that sounds like the H word, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, we've been sort of doing the little hat dance around the H word here on TNT for months because we are citing heresies. But then we get to the canonical element, and that's where we usually tap the brakes, because canonically, we should talk about the word delict, right? So delict comes from Latin. Linquere means to fail or to fall short. So delinquere means to fall short of something. So in canon law, I think, I mean, in civil law, they use the language too, don't they?
Yeah, an old civil law.
An old, like English,
When your
old
brief was called a writ back then. Yeah.
Right. So it in Latin, it's delictum, and it refers to a fault for which you can be canonically tried. And I will commend the document this. It doesn't actually reach the judgment. In fact, I think they would have been better if I was part of this thing. I would have said, we are addressing the letter to you for two reasons. First, to accuse the Pope of the canonical delict of heresy. Wow. Okay, big. And then second, they say to request that you take the steps necessary to deal with the grave situation of a heretical Pope. I'm not sure that they should have put the adjective heretical in front of Pope. I think they should have said the situation of a Pope espousing in individual cases things deemed to be heresy. That's how I would have said it.
Right. Well said. I agree.
Because by saying heretical Pope, that means it's already been concluded, which kind of makes them
adjudicated.
Judge and jury of the situation from the very first sentence.
Yep. I said the exact. I did. Yeah. I said the exact same thing. Like, ooh, heretical Pope. It's a petitio principio, right? It begs the question, right?
Yep.
Even if they were going to come up with that kind of adjudication, or even if they had the office needed to do so, you would put that at the bottom of the document, not in the first statement.
Right.
In the first sentence, you'd say, thus, see supra. He is a heretical Pope, but you wouldn't say he's a heretical Pope. See infra. It's like you want to demonstrate something that big, Yeah,
I mean, I like how Bishop Athanasius Schneider handled it. Remember, he wrote the essay that we covered in a whole video. And this document puts 7 crimes of heresy. Schneider listed 3. He had cohabitation for divorced and remarried and receiving communion, the rejection of, and I love the term he had, bimillennial tradition of the death penalty. Which we've done tons of videos on. And then the third one was his statement on the plurality and diversity of religions being willed by God. Those were the 3 of Schneider. And although he spoke of the possibility of a heretical Pope, he never took the H word and the Francis word and put them together.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, I've studied this a good bit, and I just don't see where anyone on earth can judge the Supreme Pontiff.
Agreed. I mean, like I say from time to time on TNT here, some situations are intended conditionally, circumstantially, to be uncomfortable as lived through.
Yes.
The Great Western Schism, the Avignon Papacy.
Yeah.
These were not meant to be comfortable in the present. They're meant to be chastisements or whatever. Right. I don't claim to know the mind of God. But certain types, and they're usually types on the right, are unwilling to just acknowledge, I think, in some humility. I mean, we don't always get accused of humility, right? There are worse things to be accused of. But I think, you and I try generally to say, this is an interesting thing. Let me look into it. I mean, this is just one of those situations where it's like, I've been saying that for a couple years, where it's like, this is unprecedented. We live in, it's a Chinese curse. We live in interesting times. Let's continue studying it.
It's part of, I think, the tradition of the Bible. All day I've been writing scripts for New St. Thomas Institute, and I'm doing Jeremiah, and I'm moving into the minor prophets. And I put myself in their position thinking about our current predicament in the Catholic Church. They've been enslaved by the Babylonians, exiled. The temple of God, the temple of Solomon, has been destroyed, razed to the ground. It appears that the Mosaic covenant is over, right? Everything that they believe, their system of atonement, sacrifice, prayer, priesthood, it's all hung up on the coat rack. I mean, it doesn't seem that there's any way possible to redeem this situation. And yet the prophets are saying, in Jeremiah, there'll be a new covenant. If there were Jewish theologians running around, in the 570s BC, they don't have the clear answer. they don't know how to pick up all the pieces of the rubble and say, well, here's the theological grid by which you understand all of this. They just mourn and wail. That's why there's the book of Lamentations. I think we're just in a time of lament. I don't really think there's any of us right now who can just say, well, here's how it all works out and here's how we're going to get out.
It's good. Yeah, think about, to bring it into the context of the New Testament, think about the apostles at whatever, the upper room of James or John, between Good Friday and Easter Sunday. Same deal. There's not really, like Samwise Gamgee says, there's nothing for it. When you're in a time of lamentation, you just kind of get through
lament.
it. You lament.
You weep. You're like, we sinned. And that's the other thing. And you read in these prophets, they're like, yeah, it's really screwed up. Doesn't make any sense. All the promises of the covenant, everything that was crystal clear in Moses is all broken. And you lament, but you know what? You guys were sinning. And you were worshiping Baals, and you were sacrificing your children to Moloch. I mean, Jeremiah says all this stuff. And you're worshiping false gods, and you're sacrificing your kids, and you're breaking the laws of God. And so God said, you know what? You don't appreciate it. I'll take it all away. And you know what? For decades now, we haven't appreciated the magisterium, Catholic morality, Catholic theology, our doctrine, our sacraments, our liturgy. We have who cares? And God says, oh, that's how you are? Okay, well, we'll take it away for a little while.
The clarity. I mean, to build on that, one can become a clarity ingrate. And that's what I really hear when I hear the popular expression of the Tele Nouvelle, right? Like, we wanted something newer and more exciting than the clarity, crystal clarity of Thomas. That's the intellectual component of this, of the body politic of Christ. The voluntary, the will-oriented component of it, really the viscera and the reproductive aspect of all this, supplied not by the scholars but more by the people. That's expressive of the same kind of ennui or boredom with clarity that we had for so long after the Council of Trent and at times before it, is expressed by just the unwillingness to say, okay, the rule, what a beautiful religion. It's the one true faith. We have these clear moral rules. You either become a priest or you heed your vocation as a man or a woman. If you go the more popular route, then here's what sexuality is given to us for. And I mean, at this more voluntary, popular level of just a boredom following the sexual mores. I mean, think about it. All of the moments in history where people rise up, where Catholics have risen up recently and expressed kind of resentment at the clarity in the moral theology, it always involves south of the equator, the private parts, what people are allowed to do with their private parts. Yeah. And so you couple that with the kind of ennui / resentment / what the French would call ressentiment of the scholars, the liberal scholars, and it's a dangerous coupling of intellect and will. It's all about sex.
At the French Revolution, people don't know this, people were having sex in the streets. There was mass orgies, and then you have a generation of orphans and just debauchery happening there in Paris. They turned Notre Dame into a temple of reason and of the goddess reason. But there was a enormous sexual revolution that went on with it. Same with the revolution in Russia, 1970. People know this, but there were major orgies and sexual debauchery at that time. They go together.
You had to have a minimum amount of adulterous relations with the wives of fellow officers. It was central. Sexual. I mean, you and I have talked before. I think it was your point about nominalism always undergirds revolution. That's, again, the intellectual component. Sexuality, human sexuality, and a kind of ennui, a tirelessness, or what's the word? A shiftlessness is the great word. The kind of that you see in Genesis chapter 2 with Adam and Eve. They're just like, look, God gave us this whole beautiful garden, and it also expostulates your point about ungratefulness. We have all of this, but God said not to go on this one corner. That would be described as shiftless, to say, I'm bored with this beautiful garden. I want the one thing he said we can't do. If you don't think that chastity is for you, don't get ordained. Don't get ordained to the cloth. Be married, and you're going to have to work within the confines of marital sexuality, which...
Right. As defined by Catholic morality and natural law.
Right. But there's an ungratefulness when you say, I can't even work within those much more lenient confines. You get to have a wife. You don't have to be lifelong celibate. But, I mean, that's what this is all about. That's what Amoris Laetitia is about. This is what I always tell my students. It's like, divorce is about sex. Divorce is about, restlessness and shiftlessness, and just you wake up every day and it's a heroic effort to do what might feel repetitive or the same thing, and to do it in virtue and do it with heroic love. Nietzsche called this the eternal recurrence of the same. And it's like you do it each day and you realize you're getting better and you're growing. Except all of a sudden, if you have theologians and philosophers saying you don't need to do this,
let's get excited.
Let's get excited. Try something new. It's what was point number 3 here. It might actually be a sin not to do something exciting. It might be a sin to follow the 10 Commandments. What?
Yeah,
I mean that one stuck out to me.
I remember where it's sitting. That's the whispering of the snake right there. Well, let's go through the seven points, shall we? Yeah. So I think that's important. So there's 20 pages. 7 accusations. So the way they structure this document is the first part is 7 accusations against Pope Francis. Here are 7 places that the Pope is in heresy. The second part is they bring in all their evidence. It's like a case, right? And then the third part is kind of like they're showing that this isn't an accident. Pope Francis is persevering in his error. It's repeatable. Right. It's persistent. So, I mean, you're more the lawyer, Tim. I mean, would you agree with how this document is set up in that way?
It's surprising when you first look at this thing that they get through all the 7 accusations in about the first 4 pages out of 20. And then the second part is sort of evidentiary, cross evidentiary, and then the third part is actually, I think canonically, though we said we wouldn't wade into this, the third part's in some ways the most important for showing formal heresy.
Correct.
Not that they can show us, because what I was talking about with my buddy on the way home about this is that, again, a lesson from the Reformation and from Luther. The church makes it so, Cardinal Cajetan, think of Cardinal Cajetan.
Yep.
The church makes it so very easy to retract. It's a rebuttable presumption. That's the legal term. That someone who's a material heretic will back off the plate.
That's right.
Make it easy.
The church always assumes that. So, like, if you say, like we said in a previous video, if you're a priest and you say, as St. Augustine said, if you're going to sin boldly. Okay, that was Luther, not Augustine, and it's horrible theology. Okay, so if he says that, you wouldn't just be like, heretic, I'm out of here. It would be assumed he made a mistake. So you go to him, hey, did you know that was Luther, not Augustine? He's like, oh, it is? My professor in seminary told me that was Augustine. Like, no, actually, Augustine never said that. It was Luther. And it's not true. Oh, I'm so sorry. And then the next week.
My bad.
Yeah, my bad. And then he said, hey, last week, I've actually heard a priest. It was a Sunday after Trinity Sunday. And he said, someone pointed out to me that I'd said this regarding the Trinity, which is actually wrong. I want everyone to hear me say it right. And he said it right. So he's not a heretic, right? The church is not going to say he's a heretic.
Yeah.
A mistake was made.
It's very difficult to be a heretic. Even if you kind of say nothing, like Cajetan with Luther was just quiet for a year. Yeah. The church is kind of like, I'm sure he doesn't want like beef. Like you got beef, bro? Like, no, I'm sure he doesn't. The church makes it very difficult to be a formal heretic. Right. So that's
so
the main.
You have to go to them and say, hey, did you know Luther said that? He's like, yeah, it doesn't matter. I still believe it. Like, well, that's against Catholic theology. Let's go through some canons of Trent. Yeah, I still believe it. And then you continue to preach it. That's pernicious. That's persevering. At that point, the church says, you're a heretic. Avoid this guy. And so they're building the case. And that's why I wish they hadn't actually used heretical pope.
Me too. They
assume the conclusion. But anyway, so the first one, you want to read the first one, Tim? You got it there? It's on what?
Yeah. It says, a justified person has not the strength with God's grace to carry out the objective demands of the divine law. as though any of the commandments of God are impossible for the justified, or is meaning that God's grace, when it produces justification in an individual, does not invariably and of its nature produce conversion from all serious sin, or is not sufficient for conversion from all serious sin.
Yeah. So a baptized, justified, believing Catholic can not sin. You can't say, I can't help it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not, the mark is not, when the court in American courts accuses itself, it says this is above our pay grade, an expression I think Obama popularized with a topic that was not above his pay grade. I think it was abortion. When the court punts, it will say this is ultra vires, right? This is above the man.
Yeah.
This borderline heresy, for lack of a better, more precise term.
Yeah.
Okay, so this heresy.
Because they quote Council of Trent. Let me read this. If anyone says that the commandments of God are impossible to observe, even for a man who is justified and established in grace, let him be anathema. End quote.
No, you're right. You're right.
Like,
so
boom.
What I meant is whether or not Francis fully, formally deigns to express this heresy. The heresy is the assertion, just so it's clear to everyone out there, it sounds kind of like it's various component parts of the same kind of sexual subject matter. What they're saying here is that, particularly with regard to the sexual aspects of moral theology, that the demands of the church are ultra vires, which is kind of like what Gandhi said about Christianity, right? Oh, it's a beautiful religion. I've never seen someone that can make muster.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas the church says, no, there's someone like St. Therese, the Little Flower, from baptism to her death, she never committed a mortal sin. It's possible.
Right.
So,
right.
All right.
Lots of people. Yeah. Lots of saints.
A second one. A Christian believer can have full knowledge of a divine law and voluntarily choose to break it in a serious matter, but not be in a state of mortal sin as a result of this action. So this is referring, they're going to set this up for Mors Laetitia. You know divorce is wrong. You know having sex with someone who isn't your sacramental spouse is wrong. You go ahead and have sex with someone who isn't your sacramental spouse. You are in mortal sin. You can't say that there's a situation in which they know it and they're not in mortal sin.
Yeah, I think in all ways, this has always been the most technically nuanced aspect of Mors Laetitia, because of the components of mortal sin. You and I were talking about this before. I'm not a loosey-goosey. I don't really know. And the odds are that this would apply to almost no one, though. You can quibble on what rises to the level of violence to the will of an individual. And because habit does a kind of violence to the will, or can do theoretically a kind of violence to the will.
Injure the will.
So it can injure the will. And we know, I was going through Thomas before I left school, just seeing what he would think about this. It's not really pertinent, because most people that just want to shack up with men who want to shack up with a younger wife or whatever it is, they haven't, especially when they first commit the sin, they haven't habituated it. But this one was the one where I was like, well, this seems more debatable than the other of the 7 points. That's not an endorsement by me. It's just that in Catholic moral theology, I was on newadvent.com as I left school. In Catholic moral theology, for something to be mortal sin, there's an objective component. It's got to be grave matter, which is subject matter jurisdiction. There also is a subjective component. Doesn't make it relativism. The person has to give full assent to the will and has to intellectually understand it to a minimum amount.
To know the gravity. Yeah.
To know the gravity. So I found this one spot.
But they kind of covered their bases, because it says a Christian believer can have full knowledge. So they said full knowledge. And then it says voluntarily choose. So I think they knew what people would respond. And so they chose those two words to go ahead and check both boxes.
Agreed. It's just I think I know the 2 pages. There are 2 reference in Amoris where, I mean, there are I think there are more than there are 7 spots, more than 7 spots in Amoris Laetitia that I raised my eyebrows. I think it was closer to 17. But I think this is very close to heresy.
Yeah.
I know the 2 spots they're referring to. I anticipated these, and I think it intentionally uses that Pope Franciscan weaponized ambiguity as to, because see here they've already baked in voluntariness to the conditions, which are the possibilities. So yes, agreed. Yeah, 2, nevertheless, as it relates to Amoris, could be the only one where I'd be like, pump the brakes a little. But
and
that's
I think
theoretical.
The advocate of Amoris, Team Francis, is going to come in and go, okay, well, we need to slice and dice voluntary. We need to slice and dice full knowledge. So Joe Sixpack, Catholic, he knows divorce is wrong. But does he really know divorce is wrong?
Yeah.
What if he grew up in a family where the mom and dad fought a lot? Maybe he doesn't really know that divorce is wrong. They're going to do all that, right? Anyway.
Right.
Number 3, a person is able, while he obeys a divine prohibition, to sin against God by that very act of obedience.
This is something else. I mean, that's wild.
Yeah.
I mean, people should drink this in, what this means. This sounds like something that Martin Luther was saying in the 1540s. Yeah. I mean, wild. It sounds like they're blaming, they're saying
Calvin says this too.
Does he?
Yeah, he'll say something like, if someone donates money to the poor and they're not elect, right? They don't have persevering grace in them of divine election. If they give money to the poor, it's not and they do it for God's sake. They're only doing it deep down because they're selfish and they want to feel good. There is no goodness or meritorious or any conformity to God's law because of that. Whereas the Thomists wouldn't say that.
No.
So it's Protestant. It's Protestant.
Yeah. It even goes further. I mean, it sounds more openly libertinistic than Luther or Calvin. It's almost saying you have a duty to live authentically, to live out loud, or what Coca-Cola would say, and this means having as many sexual partners as you can. It's almost, I've heard leftists on university campus say it's immoral. And monogamy is immoral. You're denying your libidinal drive, and this sounds more like that. It dressed up in theological garb. It's immoral to deny yourself.
Well, I think it's also referring to when Pope Francis said that you can be going to Mass every Sunday and be sinning.
Yeah.
It's better not to go. Is that something like that? So I think they might have that quote in mind there, though there may be others as well. All right, number 4. You want to read that one, Tim? You got that? Conscience?
Sure. Number 4, conscience can truly and rightly judge that sexual acts between persons who have contracted a civil marriage with each other, although one or both of them is sacramentally married to another person, can sometimes be morally right or requested or even commanded by God.
Boom. Yeah, we covered this in a TNT when we went through all the errors of Amoris Laetitia and all the passages, which they're going to do as well.
Yeah.
Where it implies, more than implies, it states that doing the best you can, even though it's contrary to God's law, is God's will for you, which implies that God is willing for you to break the moral law.
God's law. Yeah.
Which is insane.
That God is willing for you to break God's will.
Yeah.
Is really what it reduces to.
It's atheism. There's no way that works in any traditional understanding of God or even the form of the good. If you want to just boil it down to Platonism, there's just no way to make that fit.
Right.
Number 5, it is false that the only sexual acts that are good of their kind and morally licit are acts between husband and wife. So you can't say that 2 guys, 2 women, some teenagers in the back of a truck, even someone watching porn or masturbation, that you can't say any of those acts are good. If you say they're morally illicit, heresy.
Here recall as a kind of referent the midterm relatio in the 2014 Extraordinary Synod, which contained explicit reference to the quote unquote positive elements of homosexual relationships.
Bingo.
There are none. I mean, there are none. There are no positive elements in homosexual relationships. And that's what they're saying.
And we have cardinals and archbishops and monsignors who are going to be quoted in the second section or the third section, where they actually do their homework in this document and show that there are Francis-appointed guys who are explicitly stating that.
Right.
Number 7, God not only permits but positively wills the pluralism and diversity of religions, both Christian and non-religion. End quote. That's from the Abu Dhabi document. Honestly, Tim, I think I've said this before. This statement bothers me more. I think it's more heretical, more grievous than anything in Amoris Laetitia, except for maybe even the part where it says God doesn't will, or the eternal condemnation is not according to the logic of the gospel. That part in Amoris Laetitia. Even this, because this is contrary to the first commandment of the 10 Commandments. You shall have no other gods before me. So this, and I think Athanasius Schneider is also honed in on this as well. If God wills plurality and diversity of religion, and not just willing the Catholic religion,
that's self-contradiction on the part of God.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, that would be imputing to God, like you said, a revocation of the first commandment. The first commandment is first for a reason.
Right.
And that disrupts the very nature of not only a triune Godhead, but more importantly, even monotheism. I mean, if God can will for you to worship multiple gods, not
Vishnu.
only is, I mean, this is, by the many arms of Vishnu, this is wrong, because the Old Testament is all about establishing
absolutely
and having to reestablish monotheism. The New Testament's all about establishing a Trinitarian monotheism.
Yeah.
But that's it does strike at more. What makes God the maddest is polytheism.
Exactly.
And that's what you're being called to.
I will that you should have no other gods before me. At the same time, I will humans to worship other gods to find me. Huh?
What?
That's like saying impossible. A man to his wife, I will for me to be your husband alone, but I also will for you to be with other men.
Yeah.
What? That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense.
It's elementary. It's arithmetic. The commandment 1 is commandment 1 because it's basic arithmetic. You get into algebra with the interrelational commandments, how humans relate to one another. It's still simple, but it's a little less simple. I am your God, the single God alone. You shall worship only me. There's no way Francis can say that. No, he did sort of retract private/publicly to Bishop Schneider for what that's worth. So he wouldn't be a contumacious, heretic on that score. I think that would definitely be enough of a back away.
Yeah, so Schneider, for context, he went and met in Rome with Pope Francis. Says, now about this Abu Dhabi document. And he's like, you mean the permissive will, right? And Francis said, yeah, I mean the permissive will. But if you, like we covered in the Spanish and in the Italian, go back and see our TNT video on that, he says that God wills the plurality and diversity of religion with the same will with which he created human beings and the diversity of the sexes.
Yeah.
That's positive will. Not permissive will, positive will. He's not allowing it to happen. He's actually desiring it and wanting it to happen. God does not desire and want people to worship the elephant head God. What's that guy's name?
Krishna?
No, that's not Krishna.
Krishna.
No, that's not Vishnu. I can't remember. It's good that we don't know because it proves that we are not idolaters.
Right.
He doesn't want you to worship Buddha and rub a little belly. When I was in China, I used to put cigarettes in front of the statue of Buddha, like little offerings. And guess what? Guess who came by and smoked them? The Buddhist monk. I'd see him, and he'd be smoking cigarettes outside the temple. He was stealing the cigarettes from Buddha, and he was smoking them.
Remember Simpsons early seasons, I Still Say, are genius, where Apu Nahasa Petalon said, please do not offer my God a peanut. When Homer was,
right. Yeah.
He had the
It's
little
ridiculous.
machine.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, don't worship that, notwithstanding what Francis said with this accord.
You know what's funny? Because sometimes people get after us like we mock things. Again, I've been for NSTI studying through the prophets. They make fun of the false gods and mock them endlessly.
My friend pointed that out. It's harsh. The prophets are harsh.
Jeremiah, the minor prophets, are like, oh, you stupid dog. Even your stupid gods. Even Elijah, and Elisha are making fun of the gods. The first stand-up comics in the history of mankind were Jewish prophets making fun of the false religions.
They stayed in the showbiz. The Jew. There are a lot of Jews in showbiz, right? And Jesus, another Jew, he part of his office is that of the prophet. And think about him at the well with the woman, where he's calling her a dog. She's a female. I mean, the
well is when he says you have all the husbands. It was the Syro-Phoenician woman. He says you're a dog. Yeah. You're a dog. Yeah, and the dog gets the crumbs from the table of Israel or whatever. Yeah, that's not nice to call someone a dog. But especially in Judaism,
it's holy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or don't call a lady a dog, because we know what that is.
Yeah. I was at the supermarket and I heard a woman saying, she was talking to the butcher, I hate my kids. I never talk to them. I have my dogs. They're my kids. And I wanted to say, you know what you call the mother of dogs? But then I bit my tongue and didn't say it.
It's probably.
She probably wouldn't.
I don't know why.
That.
I have the general intuition it's better you didn't say that.
Yeah, I think so too. So
we skipped 6.
We skipped 6?
The order doesn't matter that much.
Okay,
but
go ahead and drop 6, because I already scrolled down to some other stuff.
6 is moral principles and moral truths contained in divine revelation and in the natural law do not include negative prohibitions that absolutely forbid particular kinds of action, inasmuch as these are always gravely unlawful on account of their object. This one I know well. I was waiting for this one. Thomas, following Aristotle, and of course following Scripture, it's all over the Scripture as well, says there are, malum in se. There are certain kinds of evil that do not subject themselves to degrees of habituation or degrees of severity. Aristotle gives us, the blessed pagan gives us the expression that there is no median or moderate way to commit adultery, right? Where when you're trying to habituate virtue, you're trying to get the golden mean between excess and deficiency, which are vices on either side.
Right.
Well, there's not a median for how to commit adultery, and it's funny that Aristotle gives the exact
case
kind of behavior that's
of what we're discussing here. Yeah. And I also like, Tim, how they nailed it. They said contained in divine revelation and in the natural law.
I like that too. Yeah.
Check. Yeah. One criticism that I've heard, Jimmy Akin made this one, that these guys aren't really theologians, they're more philosophers, which isn't entirely true if you look at the list. But as a philosopher myself, I actually trust philosophers a little bit more. They're more careful and precise. In our time, I'm not saying in history. I'm just saying right now in 2019, if you meet someone who only studied theology, they tend to be a little bit more liberal. If you meet people who studied philosophy, they tend to be more conservative. That's just not in Christianity. It's in all faculties all over the U.S. Philosophy departments tend to be more conservative. Theology departments tend to be a little bit liberal. Just noticed it.
You're gonna ruffle some feathers with
people
that.
People are gonna be ticked. It's a generality, folks. I don't
disagree. It's a generality that's based on the idea that philosophers, even though we admit, philosophy is the handmaiden of theology. Theology is queen of the sciences.
Yep.
Fair enough. But with theology or with philosophy, you're having to juggle. You're having to do active reason. Yeah, biblical theologian, not that it's a cop out, but you could just say, divine revelation.
When you show up first day in philosophy, they're like, you get nothing. Start building from ground zero, nothing, bare earth. So that makes you work hard. In theology, they're like, okay, we got sacraments, we got ecclesiology, and you didn't work for any of that,
right?
And you haven't learned how to think through, like, well, what's essence? What is logic? All these things. You haven't done any of that work. Yeah, you haven't defined terms, any of that stuff.
You got to fight for every inch in philosophy. Right. It's like a gridiron battle.
And that's why seminarians study philosophy and then they study theology. It's smart. I like it.
People aren't going to like that, but I got no problem with it.
It's Catholic. Okay, so the next part, the beef of this thing is all the evidence. And, there's no way, Tim, unless we're going to spend 5 hours here going through all the evidence. In fact, most of the evidence we've covered in our shows.
That's true.
I mean, you guys can go back and look at our show on Amoris Laetitia. You can look at our show on Sanchetta. You can look at our show on plurality and diversity of religion. You can look at our shows on Schneider. All these things have covered. There was one thing that we haven't covered, and it's on page 7. And this is number 8. On June 16, 2016, at the Pastoral Congress and for the Diocese of Rome, Pope Francis stated that many cohabitating couples have the grace of matrimony. I don't think we've ever talked about that one. I've known about it, but that's bad.
Yeah.
Your teenage daughter says, well, I like this guy, and if we start having sex, it's kind of like the grace of matrimony. We're cohabitating. Yeah. What? Yeah. Francis, don't tell our kids that.
You just reminded me of something. This number 8 or whatever it is here.
Yeah.
Just reminded me of something that
by the way, we are not on later. Number 8 of the accusations. We've moved on to the evidence.
No.
Yeah.
We're done with the accusation.
Yeah.
No, but I would seriously kick myself if I missed the opportunity to say this, because this is what I get the most fired up about in this whole Amoris Laetitia issue. Remember all of the rest of 2016, from April to December, and much of 2017, what the people in the middle were saying? They've abandoned it. Where did this line of defense go? It evaporated, right? Like a ghost in the wind.
Yep.
They were saying, and I can't find one person that'll still say it, that they weren't defending Francis from the heresy of, saying that civilly divorced couples who are remarried can receive the Eucharist. They were saying he didn't say that. I mean,
right.
And I'm even thinking of guys like Jimmy Akin, not a lib, but Jimmy Akin was just saying, show me in the Amoris.
Right.
And this was getting me heated.
This
is getting me heated. This is long before TNT. I was like, okay, they say the sacraments, and then they go through, and there are only 2 sacraments that this could even apply to. So
it's not baptism.
Not confirmation, not
extreme unction.
Not unction. No one's debating that. Not becoming a priest, right?
Yeah.
Not marriage. I mean, the marriage is the sort of the substance of the ground of the problem. It's all that's left is, can you make a valid confession and go to Eucharist? And but all the guys, now Jimmy Akin's saying whatever he's saying, it's like, wait. And if you're watching this, Mr. Akin, I challenge you. You stood by that defense of Amoris Laetitia for all of 2016 and 2017. Where is it now? You just let it. Everyone, all along you were saying, well, Francis isn't saying this. He wasn't. Now you've downshifted to saying, well, because obviously he was saying it. We all knew he was saying it. Now you're downshifting to, well, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, the new response that I'm hearing from the defenders of Team Francis are, there is an orthodox way to read that. That's the new one. Know. That's the new one. They're like, yes, objectively, that's a problem, but there is an orthodox way to get out of it. And Father Fessio kind of, today in his video, he said, well, Ignatius of Loyola says always read people's words the most charitable way. So that is a tradition. He's a Jesuit, obviously. And so that's still kind of an approach. But when you add them up and you got 20 pages of this.
Yeah.
It's not isolated. If this was if that quote was just sort of there, I'm like, yeah, there's a problem there, but, let's look into that.
But let's not let this drop. They were everyone, because I don't have it in front of me. Everyone, when you get done watching this, go read 9 things to know and share about Amoris Laetitia from April of 2016. I'm serious.
Probably just deleted it from the site.
Yeah, hopefully.
Purge.
But everyone knows, because I had about 50 of these conversations in April 2016 where people are like, where are you getting this? You're getting it from a footnote, and the footnote it's weaponized ambiguity. We didn't have that lovely term back then. It's been coined now. It's a coinage. But
back then, people were literally sticking it to you like, well, of course that would be heretical if you were saying that, but show me where he's saying it. They're playing a little shell game. Now, the shell game has continued because they no longer defend along the grounds that he wasn't saying that because, and this is why.
Well, there's been years now of documentation.
Right. What you just pointed out of him teaching, I don't know if it's magisterially, but teaching in a kind of informal magisterium from whatever you just read, that paragraph number 8, or of him. How about this? It was a CDF document when he said to the, was it the Argentinian bishops? Yes, your interpretation is the only correct one.
That wasn't CDF, but it was placed on the Acts of the Apostolic See, just quasi-magisterial, depending on who you talk to. Yeah, so I mean, it was put on the books.
Right. I thought that was low. I thought that was definite low magisterium.
It is. Yeah. I mean, up until recently, it was. Now everyone's rubbing their head, thinking, "Okay, how do we understand this now?"
Well, how else do you understand it?
I don't know.
So I guess that's what shut up everyone and just said, "Okay, if I'm going to defend Francis, I'm going to have to defend it." Where, even though I'd said conditionally before that if he said this, it would be a heresy. Now I'm saying, well, he did say it, and it's not a heresy. Right. I mean, that stuff drives me up the wall. There's a way to spin it.
There's a way to spin it. Yeah. Here's another one. Since we've been talking about Luther so much, I wanted to bring this one up. This is Pope Francis, quote, "I think the intentions of Martin Luther were not mistaken. He was a reformer." What? Continue the quote.
Wow.
"Perhaps some methods were not correct. And today, Lutherans and Catholics, Protestants, all of us agree on the doctrine of justification. On this point, which is very important, he did not err."
Wow.
This is heresy. This is page 7.
Where is this?
Paragraph 9.
How'd you miss this? I just am forgetting
Luther.
This. Yeah.
I think the intentions of Martin Luther were not mistaken. He was a reformer. This is why he has a statue of Martin Luther in the Vatican, people. This is why he issued a stamp with Luther before the crucifix.
Wow, I did miss
Lutherans, Catholics, and Protestants, all of us agree on the doctrine of justification. No, they don't. I've talked to Lutherans. I don't agree with them.
Yeah.
On this point, which is very important, he did not err. Martin Luther was not wrong on justification.
Really?
This is heresy.
It's you can't. This is more. This caught me off guard. I mean, go watch the Luther documentary if you haven't.
Oh my gosh!
So Luther added
the
Vimeo,
word
folks. Alone to the Bible. Yeah,
to Romans 3. He added the word alone to Romans.
Romans 3. He added it, and he ripped it, which people might already know. He ripped out the book of James from his New Testament because of the one line that faith without works is dead. I mean, so no, we do not, Pope Francis, agree with Luther on justification. We couldn't disagree in any more stark terms.
Yeah. Then he quotes Luther again. He says, this is Francis, people, Bishop of Rome. "The spiritual experience of Martin Luther challenges us to remember that apart from God, we can do nothing. How can I get a propitious God? This is a question that haunted Luther. In effect, the question of a just relationship with God is the decisive question for our lives. As we know, Luther encountered that propitious God in the good news of Jesus Christ, incarnate, dead, and risen. With the concept by grace alone, he reminds us that God always takes the initiative prior to any human response, even as he seeks to awaken that response. The doctrine of justification thus expresses the essence of human existence before God."
Wow.
No, it's about the remission of sins,
Right.
And this whole thing is a prop up for Luther and his doctrine of justification, in which he says in the previous quote, he does not err. This is heretical, people.
Yeah. That's shocking. The other one I think is more shocking, and I did see this one, but
I mean, the next one, this is Pope Francis. "We are profoundly thankful for the spiritual and theological gifts received through the Reformation."
Right.
Really? Right. Like which one?
Right, exactly.
The rejection of penance as a sacrament, the rejection of extreme unction, the rejection of matrimony as a sacrament. Is that one of the good gifts? A divided Europe? Wars of religion?
Let me get it straight. So these are spiritual gifts that Luther shredded Europe in half, and he destroyed
He drove the spike into the heart of Christendom.
Yeah.
But so he's not a schismatic, or worse than a schismatic. Right. He's not the arch heretic. But according to Pope Francis, someone is a schismatic, a young person that's 18, that I've introduced many of my students who are 17, 18 to the Latin Mass, and they love it.
Oh yeah.
He's insinuated that they're schismatics even for going to a diocesan Latin Mass.
Yeah.
I mean, it's craziness.
This is nuts.
We're getting more and more worked up throughout this entire thing.
I know. I mean, when you read the first part and I'm like, oh gosh, these guys are going hard. They got the 7 accusations, and you read some of the 7, you're like, did Francis really ever say these? I mean, obviously this is heretical. And then you start getting into these, and you're like, this is nuts. So then he goes through all the cardinals and the archbishop that he's appointed, and I don't think we have time to go through these, but Coco Puffs. He's in here. I mean, everybody, Daniels, all of our usual suspects that we TNT on all the day. Cardinal Farrell, Cardinal Kezel, who appointed as pastor a man who had been convicted of sexual abuse. What? He was made a cardinal after he did that. Maradiaga, McCarrick, Donald Wuerl, Zanchetta. We did a video on Zanchetta. Our friend Monsignor Rica. We did a video on Monsignor Ricky. Father Grassi. We did a video on Father Grassi. Father Inzoli.
Yeah,
he likes that. He likes that white dust.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. Martin. I like how Martin made the list.
Martin's on the list. James Martin's on the list. SJ.
But he is proud because he is a low. He's just a rank and file. Yeah, he loves it. You shouldn't have flattered him. You should have left him off. But
yeah, just so he'd be like, how come I'm not heretical enough to be on there? Timothy Radcliffe, the old the leader of the Dominicans. He's got some homosexual stuff going on there. Pontifical Academy for Life. Which one?
Dominicans are supposed to be. Well, just any Dominican that they would turn coat. It just
there's
hurts
a lot of them. Well, Schillebeck's.
No, there are.
Schillebeck's.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean.
No, I know. They're bad ones. I'm not disputing that. You're a Dominican. That's a special honor.
You were trained rightly and you screwed up. Come on, Dominican. Then he talks about Francis meeting with pro-homosexual groups. During the synod in 2018, he wore a rainbow-colored cross. We did a video on that.
Emma Bonino.
If you're new to us, guys, we have a catalog of 70 videos on all these things.
Yeah. Yeah, we've never covered her, but she's that's outrageous. That the number one European abortionist.
Yes.
He said she was a great woman or something like that.
It's like,
Forgotten grace.
What? Yeah, she's getting a backslap and Bono's in there and all that, and it's just craziness, folks. So then the end is just an appeal to the bishops. And Tim, what's the appeal to do? You can't set up a court.
Yeah.
You can't have you can have an imperfect council, but it has no juridical authority over the Pope.
Yeah.
He's a supreme pontiff. No one on earth judges the supreme pontiff. Honestly, here's where I'm at. I'm going to lay my cards on the table for everybody watching TNT. I think we have a serious problem with this Pope. When you read my book, Infiltration, which comes out in 3 weeks, you're going to see it all in there. There's a big backstory to how we got into this big problem, but the way out isn't clear. I think we'll have a future Pope who looks at all of this evidence and says, heretical anathema sit. Let him be anathema. We saw that with Pope Honorius. Successive popes declared Honorius as anathema sit. And then at that point, I'll be like, yeah, I kind of thought that all along. Now I can say it out loud because it's been decreed. But while I'm living under the man in his house, well, it's not his house, Jesus' house. I don't have the canonical authority. These guys don't have the canonical authority to say it. And if you say he is a heretical pope, you have an obligation not to be in communion with him, which means you either, I don't know, you go sede vacantis. What do you do?
I don't know. I mean, I don't, that's probably all good, but there is some value in theologians, Catholic theologians getting together and saying, and imploring the bishops, like, hey, you can't depose this guy.
Right.
But think about it this way, thought experiment. If every bishop in the world,
I guess, aside from the people that make this list and some of their best friends, if 95% of the bishops of the world were petitioning Pope Francis into some sort of filial plea,
right? Hey,
you're wrong here. You got to come to reason, come to Jesus.
Yeah, in Texas, we call this a come to Jesus meeting.
Jesus meeting.
Yeah. No, if you have a pontifical come to Jesus meeting is what this is. Yeah.
Then there would be, how difficult would that be even for a Peronist, Marxist-inspired, Saul Alinskyite Pope, which I believe Francis is. How difficult would it be to keep the world media silent, number one, and then number two, keep his own silence as per the dubia? We need to keep banging the dubia drum, because I think the dubia was a little bit more methodically correct in this. But there's value in these things, I don't. People, the naysayers, whenever one of these, how many filial petitions have there been now? 4, by my count. That when including the dubia, there's value in them because it's the closest that we can get within a magisterial faith to a grassroots kind of movement.
Agree. Yeah, I think it's like Paul in Galatians. He could resist Peter to his face, but he couldn't depose Peter. And so that's the situation that we're in. That's my ecclesiastical position. I recognize Pope Francis as the Pope. I resist him to his face. I look at this and I say, you are wrong on Luther. You are wrong on justification. You are wrong on cohabitation. You are wrong on divorce and remarriage and absolution and communion for people living in objective sin. You're wrong on all of these things. It's contrary to the council's tradition, fathers. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. But at the end of the day, it's just, I can't strike the hammer and say sentenced.
You're not in the position. We're not in the position to make the call. Like, exactly. A ref from across the court might strongly think, like, I have pretty good vision. I got 20/20 vision, but it was the ref right underneath the basket was in the position to make the call. So I'm not going to overturn him. Yeah, that's us. That might be an understatement, but remember, people, what later popes have, they kind of bear this power of retroactivity. I mean, if it comes out later, think about how you ended up resolving Avignon and the Great Western Schism. You can say, okay, for all that time, theoretically, we can't know now, but theoretically it could be, all of these people that thought X, Y, or Z about who was real Pope when were right, but we can't know it now. And so it still wouldn't be the right position to, from across the court, us, lay people, or bishops, be saying that we can depose this Pope by all the visible standards of the church visible, which has intelligible rules and rank order. This is the best that can be done.
Right. The longer we live through this, the more tolerant I'm getting of positions. For example, you meet people and they're like, well, I think Benedict's still the Pope. And I say, I see how you can say that. I can see how you want to believe that. I don't agree with you. I've looked into it. I don't agree with that position. But I'm at the point now where I understand where you're coming from. It's a big mess.
Yeah.
You're a Catholic. Sede Vacantis now, I'm like, it's a big mess. I don't agree with your position. It has some real serious applications, like I can't go to confession anymore. I can't gotta start watching mass on live stream, Right. There are no more cardinals. So there's some extreme stuff there, buddy. I understand why you believe that. I understand the arguments. It's pretty messed up. I don't follow you. But I honestly think that the safest position, and Athanasius Schneider called this the safer position, is this is the Pope that we have right now. We patiently wait, endure, and we resist.
Agreed. Yeah. Recognize and resist.
I agree.
I said this to need some R&R. I'm not bent out of shape at the Benny Vacantists or whatever. I mean, they're a couple of them
like to be called Benny Plenus. That's a new thing. Benny Plenus.
Benny Plenus. Okay, but I hadn't heard that one. But I get it. Again, this is what I told him. I was like, I'm not. And Padre Peregrino is cool as a cucumber. He's cool. He's like us. Is like, reasonable minds can differ because it's not impossible that some of these positions turn out wrong. I'm not there. I don't think I'll get there until with retroactivity, some future pope tells me you now should believe this.
Yes.
But that's fine. I'm not mad. And it's not like, I don't think that makes them outside the body of Christ or whatever. This is just a weird time. Like I said before, like what you said about the book of Lamentations, this is part of lamenting. I mean, even when you go through a personal tragedy and you lose, there's a loss there. It's a privation. So even like when, the greatest personal tragedy we've ever been through was going through realizing the loss that our eldest daughter wasn't going to do certain things. So it was a very directly privational experience, and you mourn it. You're lamenting the lack or the loss. And the only trick for it, first time, especially it was our first kid. The first time we went to a birthday party and you see, this is because we didn't even know, this is what you're supposed to be doing at whatever it was, 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. It's like you felt the loss really sting. And it just lasts for a period of years. Yeah. And now, and then it's over. And then you eventually get used to it and you move on. I don't know if the analogy holds fully because the only time this will be over is when it's over. Yeah. But these are all the characteristics of a time of lamentation when we're just literally like, I get it. The Lord wants to test us right now. Yeah. And this might have something to do with Fatima. We're going through a chastisement, whatever. I don't know. That's part of it. Right. That's where I'm different from other guys on the far right in the church. I'm on the far right, but with people that are within a certain mental space is like, I disagree, but I could see how you could be right. I can live with some uncertainty. Yeah.
And I think that's the way that we can, in a certain sense, we can unite and work together. And we got the Father Aid Nichols and all these guys. And, you wake up every morning and you get on your knees and you make your morning offering and you pray the rosary and you go to confession every week, 2 weeks, month, whenever you have mortal sin for sure. And you attend Mass with your family and you catechize your kids with traditional moral theology and you go to work and you live for the Lord. You come home and pray the rosary with the family and make an examination of conscience and you go to bed. Right. And you do that until you die and hopefully you're in a state of grace and you've been serving the Lord and, maybe you have a little purgatory time. Then you make it. That's what it's about. Right. So
that's good.
Yeah. We all don't live inside the pictures of the Baltimore Catechism. That's okay. We live in 2019 and it's a mess. Right. So pray the rosary. Thanks for everybody for watching. Please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. A lot of people are getting unsubscribed from the channel. I don't know if we're getting shadow banned or what. I got all this week, lots of people writing, hey, I'm unsubscribed and I was subscribed. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. So please resubscribe. If you've been unsubscribed, resubscribe and hit the bell to be notified. If you've turned your notifications off, you're not going to be notified. That's one problem, even if you hit the bell. So people have asked about that. And if you listen on iTunes, write a review on iTunes and just share this on Facebook. That's really, that's the biggest help. If you just take the link to this video, put it on Facebook, say, hey, this is helpful. Things are crazy. This gives some context for what's going on. So that's that. All right. God bless everyone.
Has anyone ever asked you to explain a Catholic topic and stumped you? St. Peter, our first pope, once wrote this: always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. The problem is it takes years and even decades to study sacred scripture, the church fathers, magisterial documents, and councils. Most of us don't have that much time, even if we wanted to. So what if there were a way to have all of these answers prepared for us literally at our fingertips? My name is Dr. Taylor Marshall. I'm the founder of the New St. Thomas Institute, and we have created an online library of video and audio resources answering the most common objections against our Catholic faith. As a student member of the New St. Thomas Institute, you'll have access to our short and informative lessons by searching for the topics that interest you. For example, how to explain the Crusades, how to answer the top 10 atheist objections, how to answer Mormons when they come to your front door, and how to easily and quickly explain the Eucharist, the Blessed Virgin Mary, the papacy, the sacraments, and much more. You could easily spend thousands of dollars taking classes at universities or seminaries, but our tuition is the most affordable on earth. Plus, you'll have free access to our popular certificates in Catholic philosophy, Catholic theology, Catholic apologetics, church history, and New Testament studies. So if you're struggling with a topic and you need help, we have resources and answers waiting for you. Take your faith to the next level, become confident in your Catholic faith, join the new St. Thomas Institute today.